The 1990's. This series of stories I call A Day in the Life, because it's all about my life chapter during the 1990s while earning a living in the San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles, California. Whether it's about the Northridge Earthquake or even the slow-speed chase that O.J. Simpson brought us all on, or the Bank of America in North Hollywood, that crazy shootout. All of these events and more I remember distinctly, and I'd like to share them with you. Come on along. The following is my best recollection of the events I experienced while operating an airport livery shuttle during the Northridge Earthquake, Los Angeles, California, on January 17th, 1994. Like most mornings, the monotony of waking up at 2:45 a.m. was not at all what I considered fun. This was the start of what I knew to be a very long day. On the road for 4 to 6 days a week, up to 14 hours and 300 miles per day, life became one long van trip around Southern California. It's funny and strange how taking to the highways and meeting at the very least 6 new people every single day could become so addicting. The idea of becoming a driver as a means of employment was not something I put much thought into. Unemployment has a way of directing one's decisions out of necessity. But this turned out to be a life-changing experience. What I didn't expect was the beauty the Southland has to offer. Considering the people, the landscape, architecture, and the food, why live anywhere else? Los Angeles has so much going on in all areas of life and lifestyle. Like any other morning, I pulled the daily van assigned out onto San Fernando Road, heading to my first stop in Hidden Hills. You'd have to know about it or stumble upon it just off the 101 freeway. Hidden Hills is a beautiful spot where horse lovers can have their way with ranch-style houses and horse stables at every view. Taking to the street, heading west through the San Fernando Valley, windows down and music playing, I would mentally prepare for sales and service. It's important to get your head into the game when your income depends on tips and referrals. In my heart at the time, I am neither a friendly nor a generous person, so the need to master customer service was always the number one focus. Morning prep continued even as the van steered south down Topanga Canyon Boulevard. It felt as if this was going to be a good day, so I pledged to myself to make it so. Rolling south on Topanga, the air was calm and other cars were out. It was around 4:30 a.m. when my rear tire went flat. Really? Now? Glancing down to my side mirror, searching for chunks of rubber on the road, I noticed the center stripes in the street had turned into snakes, slithering side to side, increasingly aggressive. Looking farther ahead, at a distance, it seemed as if God came down to straighten his bedsheet called Topanga Canyon Boulevard. For as far as the eye could see, it seemed as if the highway was being adjusted like a bedsheet. The street, the homes, and the professional buildings all rose up and down, swaying back and forth, all the while increasing in intensity. The second push threw massive clouds of dirt and debris into the air. rolling up the windows as fast as I could. Recognizing my predicament, as I've been wide awake during many earthquakes in Los Angeles, I pulled the van into the center divider and cut the engine. At this point, vision was less than 5 feet. The sound was near deafening. The rumble turned into a roar. All the while, the neighborhood pets went mad in unison. I could see nothing past the hood of the van due to the dust cloud and could barely make out the two-way radio. One of our vans called in. I think it was 104. He was on the 118 freeway heading to the 405 south. He had a full van. He was probably the first guy to make it to his pickup and had an entire family on the road. As he's talking, okay, I mean this, as he is speaking, he is describing how he's driving over the 118 freeway as sections are slowly separating. His last request, please advise. And then where I was, suddenly it was as if every pane of glass all over town shattered at once. My expectation was for there to be glass all over the road and the vehicle, but it wasn't so. The rumble slowly subsided. Dust clouds began to thin out and the bedsheet ripples decreased. And I could see the outline of Santa Monica Hills once more. By this time, there was no power anywhere, and even our two-way radios were down temporarily. But from the distance, multiple flashing blue lights could be seen from over the hill. This, too, slowly increased in sound and intensity. Then to my horror, I heard myself say out loud, I heard my own voice say, "Oh my God, they're bombing West LA. Not now. I'm not ready. It can't be now." Under the circumstances, it's understandable why a person's thoughts would wander so. While I'm thinking we're at war, it occurred to me LA had just experienced a major earthquake, and the blue flashes I was seeing are all the power transformers blowing up throughout the city. As it turns out, that particular assumption was the right one. Thank God. After several minutes, communication came back up, crystal clear in just a few minutes, and we were all given our marching orders. We were to continue on to each assigned passenger pickup and report back because power was out everywhere. Dispatch was in constant communication with police and fire services, reporting any issue where assistance may be needed. Onward I rode to Hidden Hills and the first family. Once on the block, finding the spot was no problem as the wife had been waiting for me. Under the circumstances, she was correct to assume an early arrival. We greeted each other and she said, "Well, I guess we won't be going anywhere today. They've probably shut down the airport, and there's no real reason to try and make any flight with all the chaos going on." I called dispatch with my report of the family's decision and said my goodbyes. And the van rolled on to family number 2. Rolling up to the correct address in Woodland Hills, I had barely stepped out of the vehicle when a little one, not more than 4 years old, came running out of the house through the front door with a look on her face as if she were about to take her very first ride at Disneyland. She pretty much hollered, "All the water from the pool is coming through the house." Biggest grin I'd ever seen on a person. No sooner had she said house when a small trickle at her feet turned into about 9 inches of runoff. For a brief moment, Little Blonde had to hold on to the door jamb or get pushed out onto the front lawn along with everything else from indoors. The entire street smelled of chlorine. We looked in each other's eyes, then back at the water, then at each other once more. All I could think of at the time was gratitude that she had no idea what all this meant. She may have well been at Disneyland. This mess is crazy. Dad came out, surveyed the damage and said, and I swear to God this is what he said, "We're not going anywhere today." Pause. Guess I should have drained the pool when my wife told me to. And calmly walked back inside as if it were just another morning. I hadn't been awake all that long, but my neck seemed seriously stiff. More like it would at the end of a long shift. It was then that I realized, during the initial quake, the top of my head made impact with the van headliner at least 3 times. This isn't fatigue. I could very well have a neck injury. It really hadn't occurred to me just how much I'd been bounced around. While making contact with dispatch, Little Blonde and I said our goodbyes, and the van rolled on. As time went on, I made my way back to Ventura Boulevard. The radio was working fully as it should, and dispatch said, "All drivers, with no further pickups, head back to base." So back to San Fernando it was. No street lights, no working signal lights. Everyone and their mother out there on the road, all driving like crazy people. Rolling casually and carefully down Ventura Boulevard, listening to FM radio, surveying damaged buildings as well as damaged behavior, chaos seemed to rule. People were driving as if there were never any rules of the road to begin with. Drivers ran signal lights that should be 4-way stops, in some cases in excess of 80 miles per hour. Later, I read about 57 people who died due to the earthquake itself. I always wondered just how many died on the road that morning. The news chopper over the San Fernando Valley painted a picture of somewhere else. While stuck at an intersection where forward on the right a McDonald's on Ventura Boulevard was completely engulfed with flames as high as 70 feet in the air. Now, Mr. News Guy, who's flying around in a helicopter over the San Fernando Valley, says, and I quote, "There's not a whole lot going on here. I don't see any fires." Now, immediately, myself and a driver, 2 cars behind in the next lane, jumped out of our vehicles and began searching the skies. Our eyes met and he asked me, and I quote, "Did he just say that stupid shit?" My response was to hold my arms out and yell at the sky, "How can you not see this?" The flames were so intense and close, perspiration began to form on my bald head. At this point, LAPD on motorbikes began to direct traffic around the fire by running the vehicles through the neighborhood. It literally took 15 minutes to make a right, 2 lefts, and another right just to circle the block. Drivers were still running traffic stops willy-nilly. This was far more of a concern than any aftershocks. People were genuinely panicked to the point of reckless abandon. Now, to put things in perspective, this was 1994. Cell phones were not yet common enough for every person, and the ones that did exist were at that time only recently becoming smaller than an anvil. Power was out everywhere. So if you were concerned about a loved one, you needed to see them in person. That is why I believe so many more people than usual took to the streets that morning. Finally, the van reached Van Nuys Boulevard and took a left heading north. There was some damage that could be seen from the main street, like the local 7-Eleven was missing part of its roof. But the traffic was not as dangerous, although still crowded. Back to base we go. Once back at HQ, it was pleasing to see we had power. Apparently around the corner is a company that provides generators for movie sets and other outside events. It seems someone was smart enough to go talk to the only folks who had lights on and rent one of the larger power providers they had. But there was still the issue of coffee. There was none in the valley due to lack of power. So vans were sent east and west down the 210 freeway searching for some hot coffee. Sadly, there was none to be found. Power was out all along the foothills and beyond Pasadena. There was no look in either direction. No coffee. Damn it, no coffee. The remainder of the day was spent heading out to all the assigned passenger pickups and reporting back to HQ. This request was primarily for our regular clientele of senior citizens. I was given a few stops in Century City. The problem here was, again, no power, which means not only did most phones not work, in some of those so-called luxury senior homes, entrance buzzers were equally useless. Some of our regulars could not be reached until the following day, all of whom we reported to police and fire services. For months after the quake, all over every freeway, the amount of stray animal carcasses increased. There were many family pets lost that day. In the valley, the San Fernando Valley, I noticed a majority, but not all of the backyard fences fell to the north. Over the hill in the greater Los Angeles area, most, but not all, of the entire downed backyard fences fell to the south. This was a crazy day I will never forget. It's been 30 years, and I regret not putting pen to paper back then. Memory fades over time, yet I know there were more stories to share from that morning that I can't remember today. I hope spending the morning with me in my van was worth the ride.